Are we ready? Are we ready to go? Are we ready to go like all the way, completely, totally, and absolutely? Who's ready? Who's ready? You ready? Are we ready to take the next step? Who's ready for the next step? We got a big, right? There's no other way here, right? We gotta change the source code, right? We gotta be the revolutionaries. We gotta go in now. We're gonna be lifting weights. So little weights here. You got on your weight clothes? Ready to lift weights? We can only transform. We can only do sense making if we actually step out of what might be called automatic or mechanical thinking, right? Simulated thinking, right? We're not really thinking. We're just repeating the same perspective that we've always said. We're not even sure where we got it from. And it's become our automatic, or we even know insights, but we're not actually living them. We can't feel them. They're not alive in us. We're just repeating them, right? 99% of people spend 99% of their lives in repetition. Literally, neuroscience has validated this in any number of studies. We repeat the last second. We're never original, right? We're in the matrix. We're in repetition, right? To actually do sense making, to actually become Homo amor, we step out of the matrix. We begin to lift. We're going to lift, right? We're going to grow. We're going to transform. And our intention isn't just for us, right? We're actually acting here as agents of the whole. We're acting for the sake of the whole. We're intimate with the whole, right? To actually evolve the source code together, right? And we're doing no dogma. We're doing the best dharma, the best integrated story, right? The best new story of reality, right? Which actually changes everything and allows us to actually move towards the utopia that's possible, right? It feeds the hungry children, right? It heals the distended stomachs, right? It creates possibility for every human being on the planet, right? It is the only response to suffering that can actually transform suffering. So here we are. Okay, we ready to go? We talked in great length in the last couple of weeks about conspiracy theories and, are they real? Are they not real? We talked particularly about one particular conspiracy theory, right? The 5G conspiracy theory that suggests that there actually is no coronavirus, that it's actually a function of the natural genetic material that's contaminated by 5G, which is actually not correct. It's actually not correct. There is actually a real virus, right? And the virus has actually been validated in labs cross-culturally around the world, right? And that's not correct. And we also realized that the way a conspiracy theory works is to take a partial truth and to extend it into a full truth. So for example, it is true that 5G, which is this new communications technology, is untested. And it's also true that 4G was untested, and so was 3G, but 5G is ramped up and dramatic, right? And it's also true, I'm going to add a couple of things, that 5G is very, very important, right, to what has been correctly called by President Eisenhower the military-industrial complex. That's true, right? And it's true that 5G, right, actually can have negative effect on us, right, simply because we're electrical beings in our exteriors, right? We're electrical signals. 5G is an electrical communication system. So obviously those two things can interfere with each other, and we have no long-term, right? We have no long-term, right, understanding, right, of how that impacts. Okay, and we're going to talk in a whole different, right, a whole different discourse, Nathan. Okay, so see if you can just kind of stay with this discourse, right? Because we're actually, right, don't collapse it into another discourse. Right, my friends in Rebel Wisdom are great, but we're going in a whole different direction. We're doing a different conversation, okay? Because we actually want to do a source code conversation, right? The particular thing that you just mentioned is much more of a surface infrastructure conversation, and it's beautiful, right? But we want to actually go to the source code. That's what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, okay? So what's true is that 5G is untested, right? What's true is that it can actually impact us. What's true is that it can mess with us electrically. That's all true. Right? And let me add a couple of things. What's also true is that you actually can't do a level of automated weaponized drones. Think Terminator, Schwarzenegger. You actually can't do that without 5G. Right? That actually the automated weaponization, right, of surveillance systems around the world is possible with 5G in a way that it's not possible with 4G and 3G, which means that 5G also has enormous implications, right, in terms of the possibility of weaponizing, right, reality with small groups of people who are in standing kind of global armies that can actually be manned from a bunker someplace, right, through drones. That's frightening. That's a big deal. So 5G needs to be challenged, right? That's like a big deal. 5G needs to be challenged. And there's an enormous amount of information, right, that suggests that we need to be surveilling and tracking 5G very, very carefully. But that doesn't mean that there's no coronavirus. Right? That doesn't mean that there's an overlapping map between corona outbreaks and where 5G systems have gone up. That's actually just not true. Right? You got to be careful. Right? What conspiracy theory often does is, right, and I want to stay with the meta principles if you can, everybody, okay? So I want you to get to do sense making is to actually get the principles. The principles are you take a partial truth and you make it into a whole truth, right? And often, like conspiracy theorists will be saying something enormously true. They'll get 7 or 8 things right, right? For example, David Icke, right, usually gets 7 or 8 major things right. They're actually available in the spiritual literature. He talks about them accurately. He talks about consciousness as being primary in reality. A lot of information on that. Right? He talks about distortions, right, of how we make sense in the world. Right? He brings lots of information that's available. It's not David's information, but he brings it. And he does a good job of bringing it. Right? We are actually larger beings. Right? We are actually, kind of in a postage stamp in our perception. We need to step into a larger perception. Of course, that's true. Right? So he'll say a bunch of really, really good things. And he'll point to enormously important false flags, which we talked about. Right? A false flag, if you remember, right, a false flag means, right, pirates, when they were attacking a ship, right, on the high seas, they would actually put up a false flag. Let's say they were attacking a British ship, they put up a British flag. And then right as they got close to the ship, they would lower the British flag and put up their own flag, right, the pirate colors, and they would attack. What's happening today is there's lots of false flag operations that are in play, that have always been in play in the world, and we're going to talk about them now. But actually, unlike the pirates who had this code of honor we talked about last week and the week before, the false flags are never pulled down. And so Icke is correct with many other people, right? And a much more accurate reader than David, right? David Icke is actually David Ray Griffin, who's an extremely accurate writer, right? Much more nuanced, much more evidence, much more careful. And he wrote an enormously important set of books on 9/11. David Ray Griffin is probably the most important scholar of Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead. He's the most important process philosopher of the 20th century. Wrote a book on Principia Mathematica with Bertrand Russell, right? So David Ray Griffin's a super serious player, and he wrote enormously important work on 9/11. 9/11 was unquestionably, right, to some extent, a false flag. And there's no question that the story we've been told is not what happened. That's a false flag. There were another set of agendas. We'll get back to that. So David's right in pointing out false flags. But then he makes this leap. And the leap sounds very much, right, like what's often been called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is an anti-Semitic canard, which talks about this group of people. They happen to be Jews, bankers, right, who are running the world. And often when David Icke talks about George Soros, for example, right, starts to sound suspiciously like this little group of elite people, right? A friend of mine calls them lizards, right? These elite lizards who are behind the scenes. They've been super coordinated with each other throughout the generations, right? And they're actually completely nefarious. They're evil, right? And they're running the world. And that's not actually how it's working. That's an old devil view. And I want you to get that. That's a magical thinking devil, right? That's just a postmodern version of the pre-modern devil. It's actually not accurate. It's actually far more interesting and far more important, okay? I want you to get this. It's far more interesting and far more important, far more dangerous, but also far more possibility. Okay, does everyone get that? So we're going to step in here for a second. So, and I want to try and do this like as this kind of really gentle conversation, because there's so much to say here, and I want to do this well, and I'm going to kind of keep, where is my phone? I'm going to take a look at just the time so I can kind of pace this here, and I want to try and just go kind of slow, okay? So and I'm just going to run through like 25, 30 points, super relaxed, super step at a time. We're having a fireside chat. Okay, we in? Who's in? Who's in? We good? We good, everyone? Yay, we good? Okay, awesome. So here we go. We got a yes, 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 yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's do this together. Let's do it for the sake of the source code itself. Okay. So, and I'm just going to go a couple of, step at a time. We'll try and kind of hit it. So, is it true that there are a lot of things that we're not being told? It is true. For example, vitamin C has enormously positive effect on multiple levels of health. Patrick Holford from Great Britain has written an enormously important book, which he just put out. Look up Patrick Holford, right? He's kind of a, Andrew Weil in America is kind of a very good doctor who's trying to do integrative medicine. So Patrick is that person in Great Britain. But an enormously good book. He's written 50 books on vitamin C. So when you ignore vitamin C, and when Anthony Fauci is asked about vitamin C, and he almost dismisses it, he just passes it by. And vitamin C is actually used as a placebo, right? As the placebo in an attempt at a double-blind study to check out whether hydroxychloroquine, right, is a good drug for treating coronavirus, but the placebo to check it is vitamin C, when we know that vitamin C has enormously positive effect. So it can't be the placebo, and it can actually alter the study. And my friend Daniel pointed this out, right? That's a big problem, right? When we actually don't right, immunize, right, everybody through a very healthy system of vitamins, including vitamin C and vitamin D, which have direct effect, right? And there's a number of key doctors around the world who've been using vitamin C. And not that vitamin C is the be all and end all, but it's unbelievably important. Why is no one talking about it? And there's no question that part of the reason that no one's talking about it is because, right, there's not the ability to monetize it the way there is the ability to monetize other potential treatments. Right? That's a big deal. Okay, right? And actually, actually, that's correct. Videos are taken down, right, which talk about the effect of vitamin C. And no one's suggesting that vitamin C is instead of other potential treatments, but why are we not talking about it, right? And what about the alignment between, right? Fauci is part of the medical establishment. He's been part of it for several decades, right? And he actually should come clean, right, and talk about who he's aligned with and where are all the funds, and let's follow the money, right? And what are the relationship between different drug companies seeking patents? That's actually important. And why were we? There were 200 doctors who signed a major statement, right, against Fauci, suggesting that we not do certain kinds of viral research, which they thought was extremely dangerous, which could produce, right, corona. And we were doing that research for sure, right, funded by the United States, together with China in the P4 laboratory in Wuhan, China. Now, again, let me be really careful. I'm not saying Fauci's not a lizard. Brad Pitt did a good job playing him. Right? That's not what we're saying. We're saying is that there's lots of hidden layers to the story that are not being shared. And we actually need that information to be understood, and we need it to be shared. Right? It's also true that China has made a very real point of engaging what they call hybrid warfare. And hybrid warfare against the United States means any means of warfare. For example, malware. Right? Malware is, right, a kind of cyber warfare. And it's very easy with malware to disguise its origin. So it's an ultimate false flag. And so we have the ability to do false flags today in a way that we never did, right, 1,000 years ago, when Nero probably created a fire in Rome in order to annex that part of Rome and build palaces for a number of political structures, right? That was a false flag, but that was pretty obvious. Malware is a much more sophisticated false flag, right? Do you get that? So there's a much more sophisticated ability to do false flags, and we actually need transparency, not about everything. Some things need to be held private for legitimate national security interests, and national security interests are real, and they're not totalitarian, and they're important. And we also need to know who we're talking to, right? Who is Anthony Fauci? Where is he from? What are his agendas, right? Is he a great guy? I hope he is. I'm sure he is, right? He's not a lizard at all, but there's lots of information that's being taken down, right? Christina Kincaid, right? Send me, right? KK, a very important right, videos she tried to send me about just facts, right? Facts about Fauci, right? Not attacking him, just literally putting the facts out there and trying to put them together. And the video kept getting taken down. She never succeeded in getting to me because, and that's happening all over the place now. Anyone who's speaking against kind of the party line, right, ostensibly for the sake of public health, videos are getting taken down all over the place. That's got to be scary, right? That's got to be problematic, okay? So again, it's important that we actually begin to understand what's happening, right? We begin to understand and to kind of gather information and put it together, right, in a larger structure, okay? Does everyone get that? Okay, so that's just slow. Now, of course, the Wuhan market, right, and bats and pangolin, right, in the Wuhan market are an important source of the coronavirus, right? How did the virus get into the Wuhan market, right? What is it, a natural jumping of species, right, that then emerged, and the virus jumped to human beings, or did we cultivate its jumping in a lab that then escaped, right? Well, those are not the same. And we need to know and understand in order to make policy for the future. Not to demonize, again, not to make Anthony Fauci a lizard, and not to say that someone's pulling his strings, but clearly there's a set of agendas and a set of informations here that are actually not being shared, and that's real. And we need to look at that. So that's one. Okay, and these, I'm just gonna go kind of just gentle and slow. Clear, everybody so far? Slow enough? We good? Okay. So that's one. Now let's keep going. Let's go kind of another couple of steps. Okay. So let me say it this way. One of the reasons it's so important that we actually don't overextend in conspiracy theory and come to conclusions that are actually wrong is because what they do is, right, that actually turns, for example, David Icke is a good example, into an instrument of 5G. In other words, if I was 5G, I would hire David Icke. And this is the tragedy of it. Does everyone get this? I would hire David Icke. Why would I hire David? Because David says 30 valid things, which are shared, right, by lots of resources, lots of validated information, and then he leaps. He leaps to, right, that which there's no information for. For example, there's no coronavirus. That's not true. Coronavirus is not a hoax. For example, George Soros, right, this Jewish guy is pulling the strings, right, together with, right, the neocons, the demcons. There's this little group of people, generation to generation, some version of the Illuminati pulling the strings. No, as I'm going to try and show a little bit later, it's much more sophisticated. It's much more insidious. It's much more interesting, and we can impact it directly. But it's not this group of lizards. But the second that someone like David makes the jump to lizards, right, he gathers all sorts of information that's partially true, then he makes a leap, then he's off now. But if I wanted to fund, right, someone to protect 5G, I would fund David. Does everyone get why? Right, because when he makes the leap, right, beyond what's true, right, into conjecture, but more than into conjecture, into demonization, right, into devil, right, drawing conclusions that are not warranted, right, that actually, right, the entire corona thing, right, is a function of 5G, and it's moving us towards becoming nanobots, right, in AI, and there's a group of people who want to destroy the human mind, right, and Lincoln and Ray Kurzweil, right, Google is one of those evil people. No, Ray Kurzweil is not one of those evil people. No, Ray's actually a good guy, right? And, is Ray making mistakes? I think he is, right? I think Ray's naive on multiple levels, and I think the techno-optimists are naive. But Ray Kurzweil is not the devil. It's actually not true. And when David Icke does, and when he jumps that way, he actually serves 5G because he becomes the focal point of opposition to 5G, and he then becomes very easy to invalidate. Does everyone remember, right, does everyone remember, I'll give you another example. I'll give you two examples. Does everyone remember when, back in the 90s, you could critique psychiatric medicine, right? And the kind of drug protocols in psychiatry. It was very controversial. And then Scientology, a group of people in Scientology, which is a very complex story, right, began critiquing psychiatric medication. So the American Psychological Association actually amplified the critique, right, because they wanted to associate the critique of, you with me, of psychiatric medication with Scientology, right? Scientology has clear, definite, major shadow dimensions, right? And so we now associate, right, the critique of psychiatric meditation with Scientology. And now in mainstream discourse, you can't critique psychiatric meditation when in fact it deserves enormous critique, right? For example, I'm not going to go into any particular story, but Klonopin, for example, right, is an example of a drug which has an entire subculture, which one of my best, heartfelt, right, closest, right, people in the world is deeply aware of and has gone through an entire personal story, right? But Klonopin's an example. I could name 10 examples. And for example, when I tried to talk to a very, very well-known psychiatrist about Klonopin, right, and its potential negative effects and what I knew about it, what he did was he actually dismissed, right, my story, right? And he dismissed and actually impugned the integrity of the people who made the claim. And he was a great guy. He wasn't a devil. He was part of, if you will, he was part of the field of contraction. He was part of the matrix. You're not allowed to critique psychiatric medication when in fact there's an enormous amount of information, right? My colleague who was a think tank scholar at our Center for Integral Wisdom, which is a separate movement, right? One Church and Center for Integral Wisdom are two separate bodies, but we work together, right? So Professor Elliot Ingersoll wrote the most important book on psychiatric medication, right? He's a professor at Kent State, and it's brilliant. But actually what happened is, right, the Scientology critique of psychiatric medication was actually amplified intentionally by, right, the pharmaceutical establishments in order to invalidate that kind of critique. Does everyone get that? Does everyone get that? Who got that? Who got that structure? So David Icke paradoxically begins to serve 5G. So you got to watch that very, 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 very carefully. Okay? So that's just another point here. Okay? So now let's go deeper. Let's go deeper. The third thing you have to watch is you've got to watch out for pseudo-eros. Okay, pseudo-eros. So pseudo-eros means, right, eros means I'm in the field, right? I'm feeling reality. I'm aligned with reality, right? I feel the eros of reality moving through me. And we talked about this at length in a book that I was privileged to do with Christina Kincaid called The Return to Eros, right? I feel the eros moving through me. I'm part of that field, right? We talk about this at the festival. We do, by the way, every summer, a 7-day festival, and Shahad and Claire, right, will be kind of sharing it with us next week, and we're gonna be doing it online. So everyone can come instead of, you don't have to fly to Holland this summer. So welcome everyone, right? So in that field, one of the things we try and do in this 7-day festival is we actually practice and we actually enter the field. Anyone who's been there for 7 days, you literally feel your cells, right? Your very body, your atoms, right? You're actually in the field, right? Now, when I'm alienated from that field, right, when I'm in my contraction, when I'm actually being assaulted by social media, which is this great experiment that we're all participating in, but no one invited. We're going to talk about that because that's very important, right? When I'm addicted, right, to the kind of heroin, right, of, right, my phone. I've got to hold my phone. I've got to have it there, right? That's pseudo-eros, right? Overeating is usually pseudo-eros. Obesity is pseudo-eros, right? Gossip is pseudo-eros, right? And as I try and fill myself up, right, with pseudo-eros, because I don't have real connection to eros. I want to just check for a second. How many people got what I just said? Because I know, especially the people that are new. You got the basic point there? When I'm in the field of eros, right, Maggie, right, who's new? Does anyone else? You got that? Right? I'm in the field of eros, right? When I'm not in the field of eros, I need pseudo-eros to cover over the emptiness. Now stay with this for a second. It's wildly beautiful, okay? It's wildly beautiful. So Dharma, right, and the actual story of reality, right, when we put together the best strands of knowing from pre-modern, modern, and postmodern strands of scientific knowledge in all of the different fields, right, I integrate those together in a larger whole. That's the new story. We're calling that Dharma, the new story. That's eros. Right? You can actually feel Dharma moving through you, okay? Right, and so this notion, right, when I'm not in eros, I do pseudo-eros, right? And intimacy is a subset, Jackie, of eros, right? In the Dharma, which is an important distinction, but I'm gonna bracket that for now, okay? So it's when I'm in pseudo-eros, right? Conspiracy theory is a form of pseudo-eros. Everyone get that? In other words, I don't have access to the story, to the storyline, so I actually go to conspiracy theory because that at least gives me a storyline. Does everyone get that, everybody? It's hugely important. So I'm drawn to conspiracy theory all the time because it's a pseudo-eros, because it gives me a sense of a story, right? My colleague Yuval Harari, who I haven't met, but I guess we've walked by close to each other in the world in overlapping circles, right? In his book Homo sapiens and Homo Deus are insightful forms of pseudo-eros, right? Meaning the reason those books did well, and they must have sold 12 million copies, they did well because they're telling a story. They're taking you from the beginning of reality till today, but they make all sorts of claims, right, which are not academically validated claims, right? They make all sorts of claims which are reductionist, dogmatic, materialist claims, which claim, for example, all values are fictions, right? And all feelings are reducible to neurochemicals, right? None of those are validated claims at all, right? Feelings have expression. All interiors have expression, right, in exteriors, right? That's of course true. So of course there are neurochemical expressions of feelings, but feelings are not reducible to neurochemicals, right? There's a field of feeling, right? There's a force, right, that moves through cosmos, right? And that feeling, right, that evolutionary love, right, moves through all of reality. It's not reducible to, right? So the claim, for example, that all values are fictions, right? My friend Yuval, try and read Alfred North Whitehead, right, who wrote all about value, and it's an intrinsic, inherent quality of cosmos, right? But again, what Yuval does is he's actually making a pseudo-eros move. And the reason the books did so well, first off, Yuval, he's a good writer. He's got a great pen. These are basically his lectures. And they were great lectures, so nice job. And we're not, Yuval's not a lizard. See, we're not demonizing. I'm sure he's a great guy and would love to have dinner and drink a lot of wine. That's not the point. The point is that the reason the books did so well is because they seemed to be telling a story, right? It was a bad story. It was a story built on, kind of principles that weren't validated, but at least you had a sense of someone telling you a whole story from the beginning to the end. And we have a yearning for the patterns that connect. Does everyone get that sense? There's a human yearning for the patterns that connect because we actually feel that there's a larger pattern, because that larger pattern actually lives in us, right? In other words, we're not alienated from reality. Stay with me. We're not alienated from reality. We're part of reality. All of reality literally lives in us, right? So that's what we said. We said information is intimacy last week, but information, we don't mean it the way Shannon meant it, right? The information theorist at Bell Lab, information has bits and bytes, right? Neutral, X amount of characters. No, information is meaning structures of cosmos. When three protons, right? When three quarks come together, right? When three protons come together, when subatomic particles come together and create an atom, right? That which makes them an atom, which makes, right, quarks into a proton, right? In other words, that's information. It's information. In is interiority. It's the interiority, right, of cosmos, which is its intimate structure, which is the way that spirit appears. Spirit appears as configurations of intimacy from the first interference wave, the first wave patterns, right, in the first nanoseconds, right, of the Big Bang, right? Elementary particles are configurations of intimacy. So in other words, infinite intimacy downloads into reality and then appears as configurations of intimacy, which then inform cosmos. So information, right, these patterns of ever evolving information actually, right, move reality all the way up and all the way down. They explode into DNA and RNA, right, at the level of biology, right? But it's always information. So intimacy and information are the same thing. Intimacy equals information equals spirit. It's the same thing. So all of that, stay close, let's stay close. All of that intimacy, information, and spirit lives in us. Does everyone get that? Right? So not just all the elementary particles, right? All the quarks, all the protons, right? All the leptons, right? Another word for that would be hadrons, right? All of the macromolecules, right? All of the DNA, RNA sequencing, all the nucleotides, all of the amino acid sequencing. Not only does all the proto-organs and later organs and organelles, all of it lives in us. All the exteriors of reality live in us. And then all of the interiors of realities knowing live in us. It all lives in us. So we are the universe, literally. That's actually true, right? That's what we mean whenever Barbara and I say, I am evolution, right? I am a unique configuration of evolution, and I feel the evolutionary impulse beating in me. My deepest heart's desire is the evolutionary impulse awake and alive in me. What do we mean when we say that in the Dharma? We mean that actually all of the information of cosmos configures uniquely in me, right? Then I have a unique addition to make. As a unique self, right, I do sense making, and I draw these separate parts together in a larger whole, and I have a unique perspective and a unique quality of my intimacy that adds information to the cosmos. Wow, right? But when my core sense, right? Because we're ultimately unique, but we have a shared common space. We're 99% the same. Then we have this 1% irreducible, gorgeous uniqueness. But when our common sense of reality is violated, we no longer have, stay close, common sense. Common sense means there's a common sense. There's common sense making, right? We actually have a common understanding of reality. We have a shared story about the good, the true, and the beautiful, right? About value, right? That's what globalism means. But you can't have globalism, right? Unless you have an actual intrinsic understanding that value is real and that we have genuine common senses. And this is why we have something which we call the Dharma Circle, where we actually unpack this year 15 common sense axioms that are shared by everybody in the world. People are even barely aware that they exist. So if we don't have common sense, right, it doesn't work. But it's more than that, right? We're violated. Our sense of intimacy is violated because we're attuned. We're both part of the larger field of sense, right? And it lives in us and we're part of it. So for example, when we're told things that are not true, right? When we are disinformed, right? Intentionally disinformed, whether that's by marketers who are disinforming us all the time because there's no genuine intimacy, whether it's by scientific journals that are disinforming us because they're not telling us about their ROI, their return on investment. They're not telling us who's funding. They're not telling us their methodologies. And so we're believing them because they're science. We're not realizing, just like we shouldn't have just believed the priests because they were religion, we shouldn't believe the new priests of science just because they claim to be objective science. Those are both not true. We need to look at the information. We have to check the sources. We have to check the agendas. We have to check the funding, right? So all of that. And so when we get disinformed, we feel violated. We feel violated. So we feel ourselves degraded. So I want to ask you to check this in your first person. How do you feel when you read conspiracy theories? You don't feel good. You're drawn to them like pseudo-eros. You with me? There's this pseudo-erotic attraction, right? I'm gobbling it up, right? It's a big pseudo-eros. The aftertaste is bad. I feel like, oh my God, we're in this lizard world. What are we going to do? Right? But it actually, in some sense, degrades my interior because I actually realize, no, that's not quite right. Right? It's not quite right. Right? There's a bad aftertaste. Pseudo-eros, right? Too many Baby Ruth bars, too much candy, right? Pseudo-eros, right? False versions of a larger connecting pattern. That's what pseudo-eros is, right? So religions, right, in their shadow side, were pseudo-eros. That's what they were. Religions were pseudo-eros in their shadow side. In their beauty and their interior truths, they were eros. But most of the great religions also had pseudo-eros, which means they were a false pattern organizing reality, right? If you don't believe in Jesus, right, you're damned. Or we're going to organize an inquisition to make sure that you believe in Jesus. Of course, we'll use the Inquisition for all sorts of other political motives, and we'll burn a million witches, right? Women who are healers along the way, right? But so religions in their shadow were conspiracy theories, right? False tellings, false organizing, right, of patterns of reality. So the shadow side of religions in pre-modernity were actually organized religion, were organized conspiracy theories. Does everyone get that? It's like, wow. Does everyone get that? That's like, whoa, right? Whoa. Okay, right? So these incomplete, right? The shadow side of religions was actually conspiracy theories. Those were pre-modern conspiracy theories. Exactly, right? But post-modernity has its conspiracy theories. And its conspiracy theories have a devil, right? And they have lizards, right, in the same way. Right? But they're actually not accurate. And so also our bodies rebel, right? Too many Baby Ruth bars, too much chocolate. And we keep going to eat the chocolate because we feel like, oh, this is a narrative that fills us. Oh, I can see this, right? Okay, oh, right? Does everyone get it? Right? It's not quite like a cult, although a cult is a kind of conspiracy theory, right? But it's more like it's like a matrix that we're all in. It's a field of contraction, right? We're on automatic, then we try and get off of automatic, We look for a larger story, but we don't have dharma. We don't have a place, a way to find our way to actual dharma, to an actual genuine new story. So we go for the low-hanging fruit, which is a conspiracy theory. Now, again, let me be really clear. The conspiracy theorists aren't evil either. So for example, David Icke, right? And if I was 5G, I'd hire him because the leaps he makes that are irresponsible and frankly wrong, right? Like there's no coronavirus, actually invalidate the important things he has to say, right? So you track that? It's subtle. How many people are tracking? How many people are tracking? How many people are tracking? Give me a yes. How many? We with us? We good? We good? How many? Anyone else? How we doing? How we doing? Okay, can we go next step? We go next step? Yeah, we good? We good for a next step? Okay. Right, Maggie, I get it, right? It's hard to step in the middle. So Maggie, the next step will be a good way, right, to kind of step in. This will be a good place, Maggie, to step in. So let's go next step here, okay? Because up to now, I've been using a lot of information that's based on, right, structures of dharma, right, structures of memes that we've been working together for a long time together. So it's a little bit harder to track, okay? Right, so here we go, okay? So fantastic. So stay with me, okay? So are there false flags in the world? Okay, so we talked about this 2 weeks ago. Are there false flags in the world? Of course there are, okay? And we mentioned, I'm just gonna do it now for 2 minutes, and then we're gonna make these 3 or 4 big leaps here, okay? So we mentioned last time that there are many forms of false flags in the world, and I listed in 2 weeks ago, 15 false flags, from Nero's false fire in Rome, to the Inquisition witch trials, right, to England's Guy Fawkes Day, which was to undermine, right, the Catholic structure, to the 1907, right, stock market, right, the 1907 kind of, right, crash of the financial systems that wound up creating the Federal Reserve, to Japan's invasion of Manchuria, to dimensions of Pearl Harbor were a false flag, right, meaning we knew Pearl Harbor was coming, and for lots of reasons, particularly America joining the war, it was intentionally not averted or prepared for, right, in the way that it could have been. Regime changes in the world that seem to be spontaneous. They're actually organized from behind the scenes. 9/11, the Reichstag fire, right, in Germany, right? All of these are examples of false flags, okay? Right, the Lusitania, right, the ship that was sunk by the Nazis, right, was also a false flag. We could have possibly prevented it, but it helped get America into the war, right? The USS Maine that was sunk, right, right at the time of Teddy Roosevelt, which helped provoke a war then. These are all false flag stories. So false flags happen all the time, okay? That doesn't mean, okay, and I didn't just, anyone who just heard that quick review, right, that was very quick. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. But false flags are real in the world. There's a history of false flags where it looks like this is happening and really that's happening. Now, not all false flags are bad. Sometimes false flags are legitimate strategies, right? You're in a football game, right? And you feint to the left in order to break through to the right. False flags are a structure of reality. Camouflage in nature, right, is a false flag, right? So false flags are built into the structure of reality, and they're not good or bad. False flags are bad when they're organized, right, not for the sake of the greater good. When they're organized not for the sake of the good, the true, and the beautiful. When they're organized by the field of contraction, right, in order to accomplish narrow goals, right, of greed, of the accumulation of superficial power over, right? When they're used to win in a win-lose metrics, right? That's actually dominating reality. They're aimed at the separate self's success. When I'm in a separate self matrix, I'm in the field of contraction, then I use a false flag in order to advance, my predatory agenda, however nicely it's dressed up, right? Those are obviously negative false flags, whether done by countries or individuals. And individuals do false flags and countries do false flags, right? For sure. But false flags per se, right, are not good or bad, right? False flags are just false flags. Now, all too often, false flags have been used for, right, the agendas of the field of contraction. And I want to give you some, and this has been pointed out by a number of researchers, and I'm integrating information, right? But I want to give you kind of a sense of how you identify, Dolan talks about this, how you identify false flags, okay? So there's a number of characteristics to a false flag. So a false flag, first off, right, usually requires a kind of a major emotional event, right? So for example, there's a memo in the year 2000, which has been talked about by Wesley Clark and quite a few other people, which David Ray Griffin talks about, was very clear that America had an agenda to invade Iraq. 2000, that was clear for any number of reasons. And some of them may well have been legitimate, right? So just careful on the demonization, right? Dick Cheney's also not a lizard demon, okay? We always make the other, right, the lizard demon, right? That makes it way too easy, right? Wolfowitz was one of the neocon world, was not a lizard demon. Rumsfeld is not a lizard demon. Okay, so be careful of the lizard demon move. That's the pre-modern devil move. We can disagree with Rumsfeld on every possible ground, but he wasn't a lizard demon. He was actually trying to do, from his perspective, the right thing. I know some of his neighbors in Taos, right, in New Mexico. They say he's one of the nicest, decent people in the world. Or was he wrong in 9/11? Could be. Different conversation. But beware of the lizard demon move. That does not help us. Right, let's try and kind of see it more clearly. So false flag requires an emotional event. There's actual memos we have where the neocons that were actually running the Republican Party, from their perspective, for the sake of goodness, that was their perspective, for the sake of a stable and good world, right? Whether they were right or wrong, that's not the point, okay? Right? The point is, they said, unless we have another emotional Pearl Harbor event, right, we won't be able to actually advance this agenda for the good, right? All of a sudden we have 9/11. And 9/11 is actually called by George Bush, the president, right, the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century. So a false flag always has 6 things. There's an emotional event, number 1. Number 2, there's an instant. It can be on the internet. It can be on social media. There's instant saturation. There's an instant, explaining this is what happened. So for example, you can have a personal false flag. You organize an attack on a person. Stay with me closely. You organize an attack. It could be a false attack. You create an emotional drama, right? It spreads through the internet in 1 second. So the first thing of a false flag is you've got a dramatic emotional event. Then you've got instant saturation, right? Instant, right? Immediate. It's all over the place instantly, right? In a day, 2 days, 4 days, a week, right? That's 2. Then 3, what happens is the case is closed. Okay, the case is closed, right? The judgment, right? Guilty, right? Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, right? Right? A false complaint, right? This person's a sexual harasser, right? And no one sees that it's a false flag. It's been organized by people behind the scenes. There's an instant explosion of an emotional event that's traumatic, right? It's part 2. It's around the world instantly. Then the case is closed. It's done. We've decided, right? It can't be reopened. Okay, that's 3. And this is one of the litmus tests. One of the litmus tests of a false flag is no one will reopen the case. No one will reopen the story. No one will look at the facts, right? So that's 3. 3 is the case is closed, and it's heresy. This is kind of 3A. It's heresy to try and reopen it. Okay, right? That's 3. 4, action is taken, right? Action is taken to serve the interests of the people behind the false flag, which is often invisible. So for example, let's say someone's involved in a political hit job that they want to do through a smear campaign because someone else is taking up what they think is their space, right? So priests all the time, right? Popes all the time got power by destroying their rivals. In the New Age world, the Human Potential Movement and the American Psychiatric Association and in the academies around the world, this happens all the time. People actually organize an attack, often using sexuality or money as the means for the attack, in order to take someone out, right? And when this happens, it's unbelievable. And the actors, we think that they're speaking all the nice words. They seem to be good people. They hide behind the fig leaf of victim advocacy, and they go to take someone down. There's an emotional event. It's spread around the world. Number 2, instantly. Then the case is closed. And then 4 is you're not allowed to reopen the case. Okay, like 9/11 in the United States, right? Does everyone track that? Right? So that's right. You're not allowed to reopen the case. And then 4 is, and then action is taken. Then action is taken. Okay? Action is taken, meaning someone's agendas are served. Something moves forward, right? Whatever that might be. It might have to do with Iraqi oil. It might have to do with oil and petrodollars, right? It might have to do whatever the set of issues. It might have to do with, when it's a personal false flag, with someone's career advancement, which a person begins to rise after they've done the false flag, and you're, wow, that person who was reporting on the false flag, maybe they organized it and they're kind of rising now. Wow. Okay. So it's very important, right? The scientific community that's correcting and went after Rupert Sheldrake as a pseudoscientist, which, as I said to my friend Emil, I don't know if Emil's here with us, is not accurate. right? And everyone just wrote pseudoscience, pseudoscience. That was a false flag. That's exactly correct. Okay. So 4 is, right, action is taken, right? 4. 5 is, you'll notice there's all sorts of unanswered anomalies or questions, right? There's all sorts of unresolved things, but if you raise them, right, you're a heretic. You're against the party line. So false flags always leave in their wake anomalies, right? Let's say you meet Rupert Sheldrake, right? And you say, wow, he doesn't seem to be a pseudoscientist. Seems to be a really serious guy. He's done a lot of studies. Those are anomalies, but you try and basically label him as a pseudoscientist, or you label someone as a sexual harasser, or you label, right, 9/11, right, as an event where people say, I was there, it happened. Yes, of course it happened. Of course it was a trauma, right? But how was it organized? What were the agendas behind it? And people, they don't want to look at the anomalies because they remember the trauma of it, and it's too hard to go back in it. Or they took a stand. Often when we take a stand, right, in favor of a false flag, right, it's too painful for us. The price is too high. We got to climb down the tree. We'd have to admit we were wrong. That's too hard for people to do. So people no one's willing to look at anomalies. There's all sorts of anomalies that are all happening, okay? So that's the 5th, right? That's the 5th kind of dimension of a false flag. So I think those are how false flags kind of work in general. Does everyone get that? Now, those are happening, friends, all the time. They're happening all the time. All the time. Do I think that Corona, right, is a false flag event? I don't know. Right now, it doesn't look that way. Right? It looks more like Corona either escaped from a lab, right, based on our research, America's research. America's research, again, not necessarily lizard research. You actually have to develop, right, the virus in order to develop the vaccine. Fauci's argument was that this was for the sake of public health. Lots of scientists thought that it wasn't for the sake of public health, that they were taking risks for the sake of profit motives of pharmaceutical companies. That's possible. That needs to be looked at in terms of future decisions, right? For sure, right? So I don't think that coronavirus was an intentional false flag necessarily, and it might have been. It's not impossible that it's part of actual hybrid warfare, right, being conducted by China against the United States. When China allows, and China's doing the Belt and Road Initiative around the world, the United States needs to challenge that initiative, right? Trump, right, who's a complex character and is a disaster in terms of incarnating any sense of leadership, which is clear, and some of the people around Trump and some of Trump's intuitions have been right. And one of them has been challenging China, right, in a particular way, and challenging the Belt and Road Initiative, and challenging the Chinese attempt to actually destroy the dollar, which would have changed the entire structure of reality in terms of its stability and safety. And the Chinese Communist Party are actually bad actors, right, as President Obama recognized very clearly, right? And so is it impossible that the coronavirus was, in some sense, right, released by China? Possible. Possible. I don't think so. It doesn't look that way, but it's not impossible. It's a fair thing to ask. It's a fair thing to look at, particularly given the fact that the Chinese Communist Party are bad actors. So it's not in any sense impossible, right? Not in any sense at all. And the Chinese have killed millions and millions and millions of people. They have millions of people in concentration camps right now in China, right? So the notion that actually they would actually expose Wuhan and then expose the world, not impossible at all, right? So those things need to be looked at and need to be responded to, and to be responded to forcefully, but we don't have evidence of that, right? What we know is that there's a split-off intimacy. We know that there's a split-off intimacy in the way that bats and animals are treated, and the virus clearly came through the wet markets, and it's how it spread. We know there's a split-off intimacy because of, right, a kind of ethnocentric, my people, not your people. So we're going to have flights, right, leave one China to the rest of the world, but not to the rest of China. That's a split-off intimacy. Ethnocentric, make America great again. I'm not in any way equating Trump with the Communist Party in China, not at all. But the notion of make America great again, right, this kind of nationalism based on hating the other instead of loving my compatriots, that's a failed intimacy of massive proportions, right? The win-lose metrics that allowed America not to be ready, right, for the pandemic, right, was based on failed intimacy. So all those things need to be looked at, and they need to be looked at carefully. So I want to I want to make a big jump now. Okay. And I actually don't want to, I want to finish this now. Okay. I want to finish this piece now. So if, for those of you, I'm now going to get to what I think is the most important part of all of this. And I get that it's 2 minutes to 12. So anyone who needs to go, so totally love you madly, madly. Listen to the replay. I'll stay here with 2 people. And I see there's actually a lot of us here, which is fantastic. Right? But I'm happy here with 2 people, right? If everyone goes, I'm good. Okay, but this is big now. This is really important, right? So we got to take this like 2 or 3 more steps, because this is critical. Okay, now we've almost just kind of organized the exterior structure. Now we got to kind of take it all the way and actually get how this really works in a really deep way. Okay, so here we go. And there's all sorts of really interesting side points I could say here, but I'm gonna skip. Let me try and I want to get to kind of the core of it. Okay, just a couple of small points, and then the kind of 2 or 3 big points. We ready to go? Who's ready? Are we good? We're ready to go. Ken, you're here. I'm here. If you're here, I'm here. We ready to go all the way? For the sake of the evolution of love. Okay, let's see if we can put this together in a really deep way, literally for the sake of the evolution of love, like for realsies, for realsies. Okay, so 1, I want to give you a litmus test. Here's a litmus test. You ready? When a person has, right, absolute certainty, beware. So again, David X, you're way too certain, right? Absolute certainty and uncertainty have to dance together. When a person has full uncertainty, they're not certain about anything. They won't take it. We're just holding our my uncertainty. That's equally dangerous. Certainty and uncertainty dance together. We have X amount of certainty. The Dharma is clear. The Dharma is evolving. We're always evolving with it, but there's things we know, right? And the things that are real, and there's validated information. We have real certainties, right? And we have uncertainty. But there's a mystery before which we bow. And we're ever entering more deeply into the mystery, right? And one of the things kind of in the claims that David makes is he's always certain, right? About all sorts of informational sets, which actually he can't have certainty about, right? And you can feel paradox. Here's the paradox, right? And as the person who sets himself up as the renegade, right? The truth teller, right? Actually becomes a fundamentalist. Does everyone get that? Right? You can actually become a fundamentalist very, very fast, right? That's always true, right? There's a kind of postmodern fundamentalism. And then my conspiracy theory becomes true, and then I've got to defend the rightness of my conspiracy theory. Then I get stuck in the field of contraction and all the same ego games I'm trying to liberate people from, okay? So one of the litmus tests of, right, a conspiracy theory that's actually it's not trans, it's pre-personal, not transpersonal. Right, it's pre-modern, right? It's not actually meta-modern. It's not integral, right? It's not, right, part of the new story of cosmoerotic humanism. Again, I'm using phrases that are familiar to many of us here. Okay, so it's an internal conversation in that way, but I hope people who are watching can kind of get the general sense of it. This pre-trans fallacy that my colleague Ken Wilber cites in one of his early books, right, which is beautiful. I call it a level 1, level 3 fallacy, right, in a book called Mystery of Love, a couple of years before I met Ken, which I wrote. Right, that you got to distinguish, right? A conspiracy theory that's pseudo-eros, that's pre, will have radical certainty. That's going to be its nature. That's really, really important. And it'll actually begin to feel like dogma. And it'll actually violate your interior sense of intimacy. It will leave you with a bad aftertaste, just like the establishment stories, which are forms of often, tragically, information warfare. And they're not always, but there's often information warfare. Right? The New York Times is guilty of information warfare all the time, right? They've got always a symbolic dissident, but basically, right, this is one of the characteristics of a police state is that the media all goes in one direction. The media is now almost exclusively going in one direction now. And right, for example, the mainstream media, Washington Post, New York Times, they won't challenge, should we have done a lockdown or not? That's strange. Fox News, right, won't challenge their opposition to the lockdown. That's strange, okay? We got to get deeper. We got to get deeper, okay? So certainty, whether it's from the New York Times or from Fox News, right? Certainty always has to dance with uncertainty, right? If you can only say, I know, and you can't say, I don't know. If you can't hold on certainty, or you can only hold on certainty and you can't claim your certainties, we're in trouble, okay? Both of those are insidious forms of deconstructing, right, the actual field of reality. Both of those violate our intimacy, okay? So to create truth, we actually have to gather information. That's what we're doing here at the center. That's what we're doing also in our sister, right, movement, One Church, Many Paths, One Mountain. We can actually gather information, and we create a set of certainties, right? They're evolving certainties. We can actually live in them. There's information that we gather that's real. You can actually gather it. If you want to start doing it yourself, watch Fox News and read the New York Times. That's a good place to start. Do both. Try and integrate information, right? Beware of leaps that are inappropriate. So that's one. We could say a lot here. We could spend an entire hour on certainty and uncertainty, right? But let's just stop here for a second. You got that. That's the core point. That's the most important. Now, skip. Let me go. Let's get even deeper in, okay, to really the core of where we want to actually get here, okay? Let me try and say it this way. The Bastille always falls. The Bastille always falls. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The Bastille always falls. What does that mean? The Bastille always falls means that Hermann Goring, for example, was one of Hitler's closest associates, says at the Nuremberg trials, he says, the public never wants to go to war. Goebbels, right? It was the minister of propaganda with him there at the Nuremberg trials after World War II, right? It says the public never wants to go to war, okay? Do you want to hear this? This is really important. The public never wants to go to war. So what you have to do is you have to create, says Goebbels, right? The minister of false flags, the minister of propaganda in Nazi Germany, right? Says Goring, you have to actually lead the public to war. You lead the public to war through a series of false flags. Now, I want you to get this. This is unbelievably important. This is unbelievably important, okay? This is like a big deal, okay? There's a series of false flags that lead the public to war. That's always the case. Now, not all wars are the same, right? The war against Nazism was actually a just war. That's legitimate. Not all wars are the same. As I was talking to the Dalai Lama in his room, the two of us were talking, right? In Dharamsala, where he invited me, we were talking about the notion that we can be pacifists today and not have an army. That's not true. We don't live in an army in a world where we need a standing army. Sometimes we need to deploy violence for the sake of love. That's tragically where the world still is today, right? Not to fight Nazism would have been a tragedy. But so that's a given. I want to just say that that's a given. Having said that, right, many of the wars that are fought are tragic, right? Many of the regime changes that are organized behind the scenes are tragic. Many of them are for power run amok. They're for the field of contraction. They're for the field of unlove. Now, Hermann Goring and Goebbels say the public doesn't want to go to war. Does everyone get that? That's huge. And it's the public, right? People, right, have a deep knowing inside of them. I call that anthro-ontology, anthro-human being, ontology. We know what's real. We actually inside of us know what's real. And so the reason egoic power structures, separate self power structures, Homo sapien shadow power structures use false flags is in order to arouse our sense of injustice, right? Give us a cloak, a fig leaf, right? We'll direct your rage against the bad people, the outsider, the Jew, or the communist, right? Or the scapegoat, right? There's always someone on the other side, right? We make someone else on the other side, right? We make, right, our war against them a just war, right? We demonize. Now we're fighting for the good. And that actually appeals to us, right? That lives in us. Now, underneath, we have this feeling that it might be wrong. We have this feeling inside of us that something's askew, but we push it aside because we're in the field of contraction. The public is unbelievably important, okay? You cannot affect a false flag without getting public buy-in. Does everyone understand this? So the quality of public culture is the most important thing in the world. Okay, does everyone understand? This is unbelievably important, right? You need the public, right, in order to accomplish any despotic goal, right? Any false flag goal. Now, the public has to be able to do sense making, right? That's what we talked about last week. I'm not going to review it here, Thank you, Tom. Right? The public, right, as a unique self, when I recognize I'm not a separate self, and I'm beyond the distortion of my false self. We call this the 5 selves, and it's the book Your Unique Self, which talks about the 5 selves, right? So I move beyond my false self, the distortion of my separate self. I realize I'm part of the field, I'm part of true self. I'm part of the field of true self, the singular that has no plural, right? I'm part of the seamless code of the universe. Then I'm a unique expression of the seamless code of the universe. And I have a unique perspective, which means I have a unique ability to do sense making. And I can't do it myself. So I need to create a unique self symphony around me where we do collective sense making. Does everyone get that? We're doing collective sense making, right? We're doing collective sense making as a unique self symphony, each of us deploying our unique selves together, bringing it together, right, as outrageous love. Because actually, when I move into my unique self, which is my unique expression of true self, I realize that field of true self, that field of the one, is vibrating with love. It's vibrating with allurement. It's vibrating with the desire for more and more good and more truth and more beauty. And I realize that evolution is the movement towards more and more shared identity, more and more shared feeling, more and more shared purpose, more and more coherence, more and more intimate coherence. That desire for intimate coherence, that structure, right, of reality, which is outrageous love, awakens in me. And outrageous love, here's a big sentence, huge sentence, love is a perception. Do you remember that? Love is a perception. Love is to know. When I'm in the field of love, that's why the word knowing, we said 2 weeks ago, right, the word know in the original Hebrew means to know. Carnal knowledge, intimate knowledge, right? Erotic knowledge is also knowledge of truth, right? There's epistemic intimacy. There's cognitive intimacy. To know means to make love, and to know means to make love and to know reality, right? To do sense making. It's why sense and sensuality are related. Our common sense is our common sensuality. But we can't, now here's where it gets crazy, okay? It gets beautiful. We can't access our common sense, our common sensuality, our common knowing, right? Unless we're in love, right? And love means I'm in the field of outrageous love. I'm in the field of evolutionary love. And I'm actually liberated, right, from the field of contraction when I actually transform from the distorted self of Homo sapien into Homo amor, right? In the field of contraction, I'm Homo armor. That's what Reich calls about the armored person. I'm Homo armor. When I transform to Homo amor, and I'm actually liberated, right? I step out of the matrix, as it were. I step out of the field of contraction, and I'm now in the field of possibility. I'm now in the field of dreams, and I'm now in the field of infinite potentiality, right? I'm now in the field of goodness, truth, and beauty. And from that place, in that field, as Homo amor, who's the fulfillment, right, of Homo sapien, as a unique self, who's a unique expression of the eros, right, and energy that's the animating eros that initiates all of existence, that lives in me, as me, and through me. That's my unique love desire. It's my unique love intelligence. It's my unique love perception. It's my unique love beauty. That allows me to do sense making. And I can only do sense making as Homo amor, right? And as Homo amor, as unique self, right, I actually can feel the larger field. We can actually come together as a unique self symphony, and we can actually be expressions of the leading edge of evolution of the self-organizing universe. But I only step out of the field, right, when I step into Homo amor. Okay, so now we're going to get to the 2 important things. Okay, it's huge. This is huge. Okay, now it starts to get important. Okay, so here's the thing: the Bastille always falls. What is the Bastille? The Bastille is, right, the French prison, right, which the French elite aristocracies used to torture people, to oppress the masses. You went to the Bastille, you were gone forever. But the Bastille falls in the French Revolution. Now the French Revolution goes awry. The French Revolution, activates its own reign of terror. It's very easy for revolutions to go wrong when they don't have the right first principles. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the ecstatic, sacred intuition of the French Revolution was, right, the Bastille has to fall, the universal rights of human beings. They said the universal rights of men, they hadn't gotten to women. The universal rights of human beings, the Bastille falls. The Bastille falls is because the public knows something. And as consciousness evolves, right, that knowing becomes more and more alive. Right? And that knowing, that aliveness, that which we know, Okay. Okay. Right. Just stay close for a second. Stay really, really close. This is really, really important. Okay. Right. In other words, right, I need to actually, right, feel, right, with you and together that we're part of this larger public, this larger unique self symphony, this larger knowing, that we begin to actually have the capacity in our collective sense making to distinguish signal from noise. Right? We do collective sense making together. We're motivated, we're animated by outrageous love, right? We're animated. Now, how do we do that? Right? How can we do that? How can we get to this place? So now I want to kind of get to the key here. So remember, Goring understands, Nazi in Nuremberg, he understands the public never wants to go to war. The Germans didn't want to go to war. False flags actually hijack the intuitive goodness of a public by saying someone was killed, someone was someone was murdered, right? And the bad people murdered them, and they're out of the circle, and we need to destroy the bad people. So we're actually arousing, what a false flag does is it arouses the sense of justice, right? It arouses the sense of rage, right? And then it distorts it, it perverts it, right? It hijacks it. And that's how false flags always work. Rene Girard talked about this when he talked about scapegoating, right? Wilhelm Reich talked about it when he talked about the emotional plague of man, right? And the murder of Eros, right? We talk about it on a site called Who is Mark Goffney, which is a site we put up about a false flag smear campaign that I went through. And then there's a whole series of videos, and series 4 in the videos, we talk about how you recognize, right, fig leaves of victim advocacy that are actually false flags. And there's a lot of principles there. But I want to go deeper now, okay? Right? What has to happen is, right, the public has to reclaim its power, right? Meaning the general sense of people that are coming together. But how can that happen? Right, here's the key, okay? Now we get to the key of the whole thing. And I know that I did this kind of elliptically, and I know I skipped a lot of pieces, but I want to get to the key here. Here's the key. Okay. So David Icke has this sense, right? There's these people pulling the strings. That's where he talks about this Illuminati conspiracy, and there's these lizards pulling the strings. There was no coronavirus. That's actually not what's happening. What's happening is far more perilous and also has far more promise. Okay? It's not a pre-modern devil, although there are elites that are often doing bad things, right? There's lots of good corporations that are doing beautiful things and creating prosperity, and there are multinational corporations that are much less than good, right? But business is not evil per se, and corporations are not evil per se. People, and in different configurations, are evil and not evil. So are there some, right? Are there some bad actors? Are there some bad actors that are banded together that have agendas, which are power agendas? For sure. For sure. Is Vladimir Putin, for example, right, trying to band and organize a bunch of bad actors in the world? I believe he is, based on belief and information, significant information. Is the Chinese Communist Party aligning in particular ways in the world to try and create a set of bad actors, not for the sake of the evolution of the good, the true, and the beautiful? Yes, I believe that they are, right? So there are bad actors in the world. I'm not saying they're not bad actors, but that's not, right? We can deal with bad actors, and we should, and we can combat bad actors, and we should challenge them in all the ways we should. But there's something far more insidious, okay? There's something far, far more insidious, right, than individual bad actors. And that is what I want to call the field of contraction. We called it at the beginning. It's the field of separate self. It's the field of unlove. But again, I want to identify this, Tom, now much deeper. What is a field? A field is the field of reality in which we all live, and the field is activated by a set of rules. This is early complexity theory. This is Turing's essay, the code cracker in World War II. Turing wrote an essay called Morphogenesis at Bell Labs in like 47, 48. Morphogenesis, he sets out some of these principles. There's lots of other writing on this deep in complexity theory, and then in its daughter, chaos theory. You start with systems theory, then you have mathematics, which maps it mathematically with computers, complexity theory, and then you have more advanced forms called chaos theory. Okay, so one of the things that we've understood, we've understood how emergence happens in the world, right? How how fields are created, okay? So reality is this large field. In metamodern theory, we call the large field a hyperobject. And a hyperobject means, let's say, the world economy. What's the world economy? It's a hyperobject. You just give it a name. You can't look at it directly without an enormous amount of information that's way too complex for any individual to hold. You need a collective sense making. It's a hyperobject. Global warming, right, is a hyperobject, right? Narratives of sexuality are hyperobjects, right? Hyperobjects means it's this large field that actually moves and determines everything, but actually it's not, you can't break it down easily. You can't wrap your head around it, right? It's a hyperobject, right? So it's this large emergent field. Now, what drives the emergent field, right? This field is evolving field. It's this huge hyperobject of a global economy, right? Interacting with, right, global power structures, interacting with global warming, right? What moves the way we act in these hyperobject fields? What moves us are simple principles. Now stay close now, because everything was to get here. What moves us are, there's simple principles that move us. How many people here remember we did an event 5 years ago called Success 3.0? How many people? Tina, stay with us, love, okay? Stay with us, okay? Okay, stay with us, okay? Stay with us energetically, okay? Kind of stay good, okay? So we did this event, Success 3.0, and it was about the following. What it said was that in the simple rules, right, of the larger field, right, of both Western and Eastern societies across the world, across the globe, there's a simple rule, and that simple rule is a win-lose metrics. And I talked about it in terms of, I called it success, right, 2.0, meaning success 1.0 meant obeying the God of your great religion. Success 2.0, that was pre-modernity. And success 2.0 was the simple rule, be successful. Produce, commodify your production or commodify your gift, right? Gain status, right? By monetizing it effectively and be successful. That's a success story. So the success story becomes the simple rule. It's a win-lose metrics that drives the whole system. Does everyone get that? Now this is a big deal. So there's a success story. In the success story, there's a narrative of identity. Who am I? I'm a separate self. I'm a separate self object. That's who I am. Does everyone get that? I'm a separate self object. That's right. I'm a separate self. I'm driven by a success story. Okay. If I feel not fulfilled by that success story, somebody fill it in for me, and I go to my victim story. That's another us, them, win-lose metrics. Okay. Or I kind of give myself a little bit of a placebo, a little bit of nice, good, comforting drugs. If my success story is not working and my victim story is not working, I give myself a little romantic story. Love is between me and one person. That's where love is. It's this very narrow thing, me and one person, and the rest of the world's outside of not part of my love list, right? Or I get involved in my trauma and my wounding, and I do my hero's journey through my own particular trauma and wounding, very small, okay? Right? So those are the simple rules, the simple narratives, the simple stories that define the field of contraction. In the field of contraction, I'm a separate self. I'm a Homo sapien separate self. Right? I don't actually experience eros because eros is part of the larger field. I have little moments of eros, but basically there's a growing depression and malaise. I've got a win-lose in the win-lose metrics. It means every intelligence agency is in a win-lose metrics against each other. Every department in government, right? Everyone in the department is a win-lose metrics against each other. Every country, within families, right? People are competing, right? We monetize spirituality. Spiritual teachers compete for lists and for attention share and for ego gratification, right? People compete on Facebook to say something dramatic, right? In a listserv that will get more likes than anyone else. And if I get likes, I'm popular. And if I don't, I'm not popular, right? The Instagram, right? The entire system from beginning to end, right, is, right, monetized and structured, right, to take my attention away from interiors, to take my attention away from my interior knowing, to get my attention away from the goodness, truth, and beauty that uniquely wants to flow through me, right? I'm addicted to my phone, right? I'm addicted to, right? So first I'm going to hold my phone. My phone becomes an extension of who I am. Attention, addicted to my phone. Win-lose metrics, likes, social media. Right, I'm in the system, and then I'm going to wear a headset, right? I'm going to have Bluetooth, right, in my ear. I'm going to have Google eyeglasses, right? And I'm going to have all sorts of, I'm just not just going to hold, right, my cell phone. I'm not going to wear it, right? So now it's on my body. And then it goes, right, it goes under the skin, right, all over the world. We're beginning to see implants, right, where I have actually biometric sensors that give me more access, more access, more access. Ray Kurzweil, right, has pointed out many times, we're all going to be networked in the system, but the system's rules don't work. Right? Ray Kurzweil is not the devil. Of course not. The problem is the simple rules that govern the system. The simple rules that govern the system or the field are the rules of contraction. They're the rules of separate self. The simple rules are win-lose metrics. Right? I am not valuable because I exist. I'm not valuable because I have a unique self. I'm valuable if I produce and commodify a particular way. Without that, I have no value. And you think I just made that up? So even though we have enough medicine to go around for everyone in the world, we have enough food to go around for everyone in the world, hundreds of millions of people die. 2 billion people don't have, right, water. Why? Because it doesn't serve anyone's win-lose metrics. There's no win-lose metrics in which someone is served, right, by making sure that every person in the world has sanitized water, that every person in the world has food, right? There's no win-lose metrics that serves that. So we build, right, this exponential growth curve to keep producing, to keep monetizing, right? We lend money we don't have, fractional reserve banking, right? In this kind of, right, very, very dramatic, fragile system. We keep extending. We have no supplies. We don't build up supplies. We just buy for what we need that day. We buy in particular ways, extended supply chains, right, which are all monetized for immediate profits, right? In my particular win-lose game. If I know there's a pandemic coming, right, I don't want to get fired from my job, so I actually won't protest, right, and kind of turn the table upside down, even though I know there's a pandemic coming and quite a few people knew it was coming, but no one wanted to risk their job because it's a win-lose metrics. Win-lose metrics, win-lose metrics. So win-lose metrics creates exponential growth curves. Win-lose metrics creates, right, fragility, what Nassim Taleb called fragility. Like complicated systems, David Snowden said, which are complicated, right? They're not complex. And a complex system means, in our definition, there's allurement between the parts. There's outrageous love between the parts. There's no one that's split off, right? A complex system is not complicated. It's complex, meaning there's a shared field of intimacy. And there's allurement between all the parts. There's not split off financial instruments in one part of the world that you can't see, feel, hear, or touch that cause a financial collapse in another part of the world. That's split off intimacies, right? That's the win-lose metrics driving complicated systems, right? That's the field of contraction where I only have value if I win in the win-lose metrics. That field is the danger, right? Into that field steps AI, artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is dangerous. Machine learning is dangerous because it's driving Google. Google is where I go to get my information. It's where I go to do my sense making. It's driving Facebook. Facebook is set up to monetize my attention and harvest my data for the sake of profit for a very, very small group of people. Google is set up to, again, right, monetize my attention, do my sense making for me. Right? Google decides based on their algorithm, implemented by people who have no sense of a story, no sense of dharma, no sense of a shared value field, right? 25-year-old kids, right, who basically have separate self, right, ethic, right? No larger sense of any deeper structure of reality. They're doing the algorithms and they determine what comes up in your search. But Google doesn't only want you to search for, you know, what car to buy. Google's going to want you to search ultimately for everything. Google wants us to turn to it for virtually everything. Google's going to become more and more expansive, right? Then as we begin to have biometric sensors under the skin, right? And imagine now a totalitarian government that demands that everyone be part of the system and have a biometric sensor in order to get appropriate health care, because your biometric sensor can actually detect cancer 30 years from now. So we trade our freedom for health, which is always what happens. Dystopia is always brought into activation because there's a potential utopia. We offer people health, right? You go to Google, they're going to find you the right mate, right? Right? You actually don't know how to do decisions yourself. Sense making is too complicated. Richard Dawkins said, I didn't vote on Brexit. I don't know what Brexit is, right, in Great Britain. We can't do individualized sense making. So Google starts to do it for us. Google is monetized. It's data harvesting. We've got our Google glasses on. Now we've got our biometric sensor inside of us, right? We can now be tracked by that biometric sensor. I'm now watching a movie And when I watch that movie, I get enraged, right? When I see some scene that the government did, and the government now can track me in a way they never could. Remember that movie, The Lives of Others, about the Stasi secret police in East Germany? So in The Lives of Others, the Stasi secret police or the KGB in the Soviet Union or the CIA in its distorted forms, right? They couldn't do much because they had no way they didn't have enough data. You need huge data fields. They didn't know how to biohack. They didn't have enough neuroscience to biohack our biological neurochemical fields, right? And they didn't have a way of processing the information. You've got to be able to, you need massive computational power to process information. You need huge data sets, and you need to be able to, right, essentially hack the life sciences. All three of those are available today. That's a big deal. So all of a sudden, right, you don't need a Stasi agent writing a report about you. Everything you do is recorded. That's just true, right? And anytime you interact, right, on the web, anything you've done is recorded. And it's available, right? Now, if you have a biometric sensor, and Putin is successful and China is successful with the social credit score system, which is a version of dystopia unfolding, right? And we begin to need to have biometric sensors in much of the world in order to have availability of health. And I can't get insurance without having a biometric sensor. And I can't get a job without having a biometric sensor, one of the few jobs that are available, right? And I can't get treatment for my kids without them having a biometric sensor. All of a sudden, not because a bunch of lizards did it. You get it? Not because a bunch of devils did it. This is the point. This wasn't done by devils, right? The fear is not this elite group of devils. That's not the fear. The fear is that the natural movement, and this is the key. And Tom, this is where we were going. The fear is that the natural movement of the field of contraction, organized by simple rules that optimize, right, for profit, that optimize for creativity that's not in service of the larger good. I create it just because I can. I make the drone because I can. I make 5G automated drones because I can, right? We create dangerous AI because we can. And once one party participates in the race, everyone has to participate. So a couple of bad actors drive the whole race. Entrepreneurs, right, who created social media? I'll just give an example. Who created social media? Why are we all participating in the social media experiment? Who agreed to that? I didn't agree to it. Right? Who voted on AI? How many people listening right now voted around the world? Who voted on AI, artificial intelligence? No one. Who voted on machine learning? No one. And so imagine AI that's able to beat chess masters, right, is optimized, right, to control your consumer decisions. Right? You thought you had some independence of a consumer, right? You knew they were marketing towards you, but you had some independence. But now AI that can beat chess masters is optimized, right, to move your decisions. And we know how you feel about everything because we have all this personalized data on you. Do you think you have any kind of real independence in the way you vote, in the way you make your purchasing choices? But being a voter and a consumer is the essential self-definition, right, of a separate self. So you've got a separate self who's a voter or a consumer who actually doesn't know how to vote and doesn't know how to make decisions, right? The sense-making apparatus, right, the complexity, of these hyper-object fields is way too complex. You're disinformed on every side. Go to Google, right? And as you begin to become, it's not that there was a bunch of lizards, right? The David Icke scenario would be relatively easy to deal with, right? But actually, it's a much more complex, the field itself, the emergent property of the field of contraction, what we might call the field of unlove, naturally leads towards, right, a world in which AI is enormously dominant, in which human beings, because of AI, don't have jobs, right? And you've got no dharma, right? In other words, we're in the field, we're in the matrix, right? We actually can't find our way out, right? Because the simple rules that govern the field of contraction are win-lose metrics, exponential growth curves, right? Which create fragile systems, right? Which then begin to make a devil's bargain with us. And here I will use the word devil metaphorically, right? A devil's bargain with us, trade your freedom for health, right? False flags, right? Arouse us all along the way to move us along the way, right? But not because there's one company behind the scenes doing it. It's far more dangerous. It's the field itself. Does everyone get that? The field itself, the Success 2.0 win-lose metrics field is a field of unlove. But here's the good news. Here's the crazy, wild good news. And it's why I'm staking my life on this. Okay? This is the crazy, wonderful good news, right? We can affect the field. We can affect the field. We affect the field by actually introducing a better set of first principles, right? A better set of simple rules, right? You change the field by writing a great library and then boiling down that great library to you got to prove it. We got to prove that your simple rules are true, but your simple rules are not first simplicity. They're not dogmatic. You get that, Terry? These aren't dogmatic. It's not that we made them up, not that we're imposing them on someone, right? They're actually the value structures of reality that are disclosed by the best and leading subtle and speculative minds and hearts. When we gather all the information from pre-modern, modern, and postmodern, we weave it together into a whole larger than the sum of the parts, and we get this new Dharma, and then we boil that new Dharma down to simple principles. Simple principles. Here's a simple principle. Ready for a simple principle? Here it is. Who are you? You're a unique self. You're a unique expression of the entire field. Who are you? You're an irreducible, unique expression of the love intelligence, love beauty, and love desire. That's the initiating and animating eros of all that is. That lives in you, as you, and through you. That never was, is, or will be ever again other than through you. And as such, you are needed by all that is. And your gift is desired, chosen, recognized, adored, loved by all that is. As such, you can do your unique sense making. You can play your instrument in the unique self symphony. And you can add something to the music of reality that no one but you could ever add. That's your unique self. That's your core identity. It's not dependent on your job. So unique self is a core principle. Do you get that? Unique self is a core principle. That's a first principle. If you don't have a first principle of unique self, then you're driven by a win-lose metrics. And then the win-lose metrics, do you get it? Then the win-lose metrics, right, drives the whole field in a separate self, right, brutal competition where you've got a win-lose, win-lose, all through democracy, all through totalitarian states. It's win-lose all across the board, right? So you got to step out of the win-lose metrics. That takes you out of the field of contraction. That takes you into the field of outrageous love, right? And when I step into my unique self, and I realize that my unique self is my unique incarnation of Eros, and it's the same Eros all the way up and all the way down. And the allurement that draws me to you, the reason I'm lonely is because my insides got to talk to your insides, because that's a simple rule of reality. We got to talk to each other. We got to find each other. We've got to love each other. We've got to care for each other, right? But we got to do that because, not because somebody imposed it from without, because I feel the field of love intelligence moving in me, right? And I feel, right, my deepest heart's desire, which is to be of service, which is to create for the sake of the good, the true, and the beautiful. And I feel my desire to be significant. And to be significant, I've got to give my unique gift. And I'm going to give my unique gift in a way which I realize the entire field is affected by it. And I feel my power moving through me, because power is not negative. Power is beautiful. I feel the infinity of power uniquely disclosed as me, giving my unique gift. And I realize that my instrument in the unique self symphony, right, the unique self jazz symphony, changes the score of the entire symphony. And the symphony is a coherent, intimate expression, right, of music. And music is the intimate universe disclosed. Like, you begin to see? So all of the distinctions that we're drawing at the Center for Integral Wisdom, the Foundation for Conscious Evolution, that are expressed with our sister organization here in One Church, Many Paths, One Mountain, these are the simple rules, right, that leap us out, right, of, right, the field of unlove, the field of contraction, and we can walk in the wide places, right? We can feel the expansion. We can feel the possibility of possibility. But what happens is, right, what happens is these simple rules create new hyper objects. You get it? And it's the global economy as it exists now is created by the simple rules of separate self, right? Of dog eat dog, of win-lose metrics, right? So we have a global economy that's a hyper object, right? That no one can do sense making on individually because it's way too complicated. And we're getting disinformed from all sides because different separate self agendas and groups of separate self agendas are driving the information process. But when we actually create a new field, right? And this is what Goring said. Goring says, the masses never want to go to war. If the masses intuit Homo, amor. But we have to articulate it, right? We have to make it real. We have to make it possible. We have to articulate in a great library and in simple books, but second simplicity, not first simplicity. The simplicity after the complexity, the simple rules that generate new fields. right? The fields of love intelligence, you know, and when that movie, remember that movie, The Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. It's not quite if you build it. If you articulate the source code, if you articulate the simple rules, everyone's going to recognize them because they already live inside of you. It's not that Barbara Marx Hubbard can't write rules. I can't write rules. Ken Wilber can't write rules. No one can write rules. We can disclose what's there, right? But that's the greatness of Dharma. Right? Dharma means, but you can't just say it. I mean, I've spent the last 40 years, day and night, right? You know, no extras, no frills, right? Other than just handling reality to stay alive, right? Trying to understand these simple rules. That's what Turing did. That's what my friend Ken Wilber did. That's what Alfred North Whitehead did. And then we come together as Unique Self Symphony. We share, we articulate, we sharpen these rules. And we actually, but the rules are the simple rules that are backed by the universe. They're not imposed. They're the nature of reality itself. So for example, the Dharma of the 5 selves, which I'm not going to go into now, right? That's a simple set of rules. Oh, the 5 selves. Oh, my separate self, my false self, my true self, my unique self, my evolutionary unique self. Simple to explain. 3 levels of relationship: roommate, soulmate, and homemate, right? Right? You begin to see how it works. Simple rules generate an entire new reality. So in order to respond, right, reality is a big conspiracy, right? We are breathing together. But the big conspiracy of reality is that the deepest structures of reality are conspiring towards the good, right? The arc of reality tilts towards the good, the true, and the beautiful. Reality, right? The evolution of love is inherent in reality, right? The emergence of science is beautiful. The emergence of new codes, new evolutionary love codes, simple rules that can generate a new field unlike anything we've ever experienced before, that can generate a self-organizing universe, self-organizing through unique selves who recognize themselves as unique configurations of eros and evolutionary love, right? See, that's what we have to do, right? In other words, the dystopia is real, right? And the win-lose metrics and the unbridled entrepreneurship and the unbridled greed, right? And the separate self-power games, right? Those are all real, right? And they will generate, right, a hyper object in which AI will actually, right, in a period of 25 to 30 years, right, could actually destroy reality as we know it in terms of the genuine sense of individual freedom, the genuine sense of human intimacy, right? So we need to actually download evolutionary love and these simple rules into the AI programs. And as the people programming AI can't be in the field of contraction, right? They can't be, right, stuck in the field of unlove. Right? They actually have to be animated themselves with evolutionary love, animated themselves with Dharma. Dharma is intimacy, right? Dharma is the mother, right? So we begin to see it, right? Like, wow, right? Wow. Okay. So the threat is not 20 lizards or Illuminati, right? Who are controlling it behind the scenes. Yes, there could be, and often are, right? Groups that are covert, that have hidden agendas, that are doing negative false flags that need to be exposed and challenged. Yes. But the danger is actually the emergent properties of a field of unlove, a field of contraction, driven by win-lose metrics, creating fragile systems, right? Emergent AI, police states, right? Under the skin surveillance, trading health for freedom. Wow. Right? Wow. Right? How do we counter that? It's too big. It's not too big, right? It's not too big. It's not too big. We counter it by becoming the Dharma. We become outrageous lovers. We become Homo amor. We write the great library, right? We create it. We write the simple books, right? We put them out there. It'll take us a decade, right? And other people join us from around the world because we're not the only ones in this, right? That would just make us into a win-lose metrics game, right? But we've got a key piece of it. We've been saying this for a decade. We've been deep in. Barbara's been deep in for 50 years, 60 years. I've been deep in for 40, right? My friend Ken's been deep in for 40, 50, right? But we've got in what we call cosmoerotic humanism, the universal love story, unique self, right? Roommate, soulmate, homemate. We've got a set of distinctions of first principles that generate a new field. That's complexity theory, friends. This is science. You generate a new field by a new set of first principles. Those first principles are that which unites us, far greater than that which divides us. They're backed by the universe. They're validated. They're not dogmatic, Like, wow. Cha, right? Cha, right? Wow. 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 Thank you, everyone, right? It's a big deal. It was a big deal. We got a sense of it. We got a sense of it. We don't have the whole thing. We don't have the whole thing, but we begin to get a sense of it, right? We begin to get a sense of how it works, right? Let me finish with this. Let me finish with this. Every single one of us is making 1,000 decisions every day. Am I Homo amor? Or am I separate self, Homo sapien in a win-lose matrix? In order for me to be Homo amor, I need to feel the field alive in me. I need to actually have a palpable feeling, an embodied feeling, right, of the eros of reality alive in me. And then the split between me and you disappears, right? Autonomy and communion, globalism and nationalism, autonomy and communion, us and them, right? Blue states and red states, whatever the version of it is, those us-them splits, they are resolved in ecstasy and intimacy. When I'm in the field of Homo amor and I feel you and you feel me, and we're making love. It's what Meister Eckhart, the Christian mystic, meant when he said, reality is kissing itself, right, all the time. Molecules and atoms are making love all the time. Reality is a love story. Reality is a constant heros-gamos. There's a constant lines entering circles, circles riding lines, right? There's always lovemaking. Right? It's a cosmo-erotic universe. Literally, scientifically, it's cosmic eros, right? Our sexuality is cosmic eros performed in the flesh. But the sexual models eros. We're making love all the time, right? And so there's only one question, right, that we ever have to ask ourselves, right? What does it mean for me in the next moment to make love with reality? But when I'm making love, we're lovers, we're beloveds, we're homo amor. We're in the field of love. We can feel each other, right? Right? Lovers have a genuine shared identity. They realize we're part of a larger shared field, so we drop, we get vulnerable. We get naked, but we got to get more than naked, right? We got to get more than naked where we can actually feel each other. And when I touch you, right, you're blown away by feeling. When you touch me, I'm blown away by feeling. And one of the things we're learning in lockdown is how to touch each other emotionally and aesthetically and spiritually and existentially. We want to touch each other. We want to feel each other. We want to create cascading waves of pleasure between each other. And if my foot hurts, then our foot hurts, right? See, that's the movement, right? That's the movement. It's the movement towards what we've called here cosmocentric intimacy. Not cosmocentric consciousness. There's egocentric, ethnocentric, world-centric, and cosmocentric. And I've talked about them many times, and we'll talk about them in different ways next week. But it's not consciousness, it's intimacy. The interior of consciousness is intimacy. Cosmocentric intimacy means I feel the whole thing. And the whole thing feels me. And I have a particular commitment to myself and to you and to my family. Then that commitment expands. And I feel the whole nation, nationalism. Then I feel globalism, right? Beautiful. I feel every human being. And I feel all the animals and all the bats and all the pangolin and all the dogs. And I feel buddy. And I feel the whole thing. And I feel the plants. I feel the whole thing. And the whole thing feels me. And there's this field of feeling that's discerning and it's brilliant. And it's technological. And it's interior and it's exterior. And it's all, right? That's how it begins to happen, right? That changes the field. We change the field by not getting seduced in our individual decisions by strategy. Our strategy is love. There's one strategy. The strategy is outrageous love. And every decision along the way, we got to really be careful of ends justifying means, right? No. Every step of the way is outrageous love, right? We don't leave anyone outside the circle. We don't let external forces, right, alienate between us and our closest friends. We're strategic, and our strategy is outrageous love. And we don't give up our friends. We don't give up our integrity for the sake of this larger noble goal. We stand with each other and we sacrifice. We lay down our life for each other all the time, not by dying, but by dying to the field of unlove, by dying to our separate self, by dying to the contraction, by walking together, holding hands in the wide places. There's only one strategy. Strategy is outrageous love, but for real, right? Outrageous love is not mere sentiment. It's literally the heart of existence itself, right? Wow. So thank you, everyone. Deepest bow.